In the 1930s, when FDR took office, in the midst of a recession, FDR took a very interesting course of action, not very Calvin Coolidge-like. He decided to choose massive government spending and the creation of monstrous bureaucracies. Do we detect a Democrat pattern here in all of this? He turned what was a manageable recession and turned it into a 10-year depression. And in the midst of that, the forgotten man was the poor, beleaguered taxpayer who had to pick up the difference, and the small businessmen who saw collapse after collapse and foreclosure after foreclosure because of the massive spending and the government intervention that never worked. We thank Amity Shlaes and Bert Folsom for their great books for telling us that story. Now take a quantum leap forward to the 1960s under President Johnson and his Democrat majorities, building upon the legacy of FDR. He created the modern welfare state, as you know, and having spent every dime and then some of all of the receipts that have come in from Social Security, from Medicare, they have left us now holding an invoice in excess of $105 trillion in unfunded federal net liabilities, which obviously wasn't enough of a debt load for the current administration. It sounds to me like someone is choosing decline. But that isn't what the founders chose. The founders of this great nation did not choose decline. They chose us, and they chose greatness for us. They were wise, and they gave us a legacy unlike any in the recorded annals of all human history. It was John Quincy Adams who wrote, on the 61st anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, "For the first time since the creation of the world was laid the foundation of government upon the principles of human rights," and comprised, if it goes up on the screen, we'll see, and comprised of a few short sentences. You probably know this from memory and you don't need it. We hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's our mission statement. That's the American mission statement. It's our creed. It's the essence of who we are as a people. We are creatures made by God. God gave us rights. These are rights that government can never give to us. And the beauty of that is that these are rights that government can never take away from us. And there's only one reason that government exists. It exists to secure these rights back to us, to the people. And government derives its power from the consent of the people. It's a beautiful story, this American story. John Quincy Adams went on to say in his speech, "Never before in the history of man had there been an example of a government directly and expressly instituted on this principle of consent by the governed." What a concept. I mean, just imagine. You mean like if 2/3 of the American people repudiate a policy like the job-killing government takeover of health care, you mean like government might listen? Yes, that's exactly what the founders were thinking. Exactly. That among these are life. This is our birthright, the founders said. It's the most personal life, the most personal of all our rights. It's the one that ascribes dignity and worth to every human being. Without life, there is no other rights. Therefore, it is the ultimate human life and must be respected. Liberty. Liberty is the right. It's the right to be free in our conscience, in our mind, free in our decision making. Now, what does that tell you about the Obama thought police, the Obama speech police? That is not what the founders intended. and the pursuit of happiness. Now, this is the fun, inalienable right, the pursuit of happiness. This requires, however, according to the founders, economic liberty. Pursuit of happiness meant you and I have a right to our labor. We have a right to the fruits of our labor. Now, today, we take this for granted. We say, yeah, Michelle, so what? That's the way it is. No, this was a radical concept in the history of man. What I produce belongs to me, not the king, not government. That's us. That's our legacy. The world never knew that before the United States of America. It's private property that drives our economy. And the bondholders at Chrysler only know this all too well. Liberty, self-government, these are the ideals that animated the Founding Fathers. And Matt Spalding, a great scholar from Heritage Foundation, wrote about America's greatness and some stories in his wonderful book, We Still Hold These Truths. Let me tell you just a couple of those stories. One is about a young man, Levi Preston. He was in his early 20s in the spring of 1775. He lived near Concord, Massachusetts, and the time came for the call for him on liberty. Levi Preston answered the call. Here he was, a young man, took up his musket. He risked everything to fight outnumbered against the greatest military power in the world. But he was brave, and he was asked later as an older man, when he was Captain Preston, he was asked, was it the intolerable oppression of the British colonial policy? Was it the Stamp Act? Levi said, I never saw any stamps. Well, what about the tax on tea? I never drank a drop of this stuff. The boys threw it all overboard. Well, it must have been your reading of John Locke on liberty. Wasn't that it? Levi said, I never heard of him. In my house, we only read the Bible, the Catechism, Watts Hymnal, the Almanac. Well, what was it, asked the interviewer. What made you take up your arms against the British? Young man, what we meant in going for those redcoats was this. We always had governed ourselves, and we always meant to. And he said that the British didn't think that they should. Levi Preston, on that fateful day, chose liberty, suffering, self-sacrifice, and he chose greatness, not decline, for America.